In this episode, we're thrilled to be joined by Danny Lee Clark, otherwise known as Nitro from American Gladiators, which hit our screens in the late 90s. Having watched Muscles Mayhem on Netflix, we were really touched by Danny's story and knew he'd inspire, motivate, and engage our midlife listeners.
We can tell you he did not disappoint, and truly, this is one of our all-time favourite conversations as we dive into what it means to be fulfilled, happy, and healthy in the second act of our life. After Gladiators, Danny went on to become a best-selling author and speaker. You can find out more about him in the show notes.
Hi, I'm James Davis.
And I'm Claire Davis.
We're the Midlife Mentors, here to lift the lid on how to achieve health and happiness.
The balanced, no-nonsense way.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the Midlife Mentors with me, James.
And me, Claire. How are you doing? Well, firstly, we're super excited with our guest today. But what have we been up to, James, in the last week?
Well, it doesn't seem like that long since we recorded the last episode. I think we've just been more of the same, Claire. Working, swimming in the ponds, and that's probably about it. We're planning our retreat for October as well in Ibiza.
Yeah, we're really excited. We're getting lots of people booking onto our Ibiza retreat now, which is at the luxury Six Senses resort in the north of the island. So we're back in Ibiza where 38 Degrees North, our other brand, was born. So we're looking forward to that.
We are,
aren't
excited.
we? Hanging out with you all.
But let's get right into this episode because we are so excited that we have a man who we can describe as a legend, I think.
He is a legend.
Yeah. So we have Danny Lee Clark, aka Nitro from American Gladiators. So Dan is a former American football player. He's now a best-selling author, speaker, and TV personality. And Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome, Dan.
Well, Claire and James, I'm excited to be here, and I'm so excited about this October. That is so fantastic. We were just talking about how I may show up as a guest instructor and a guest host, and I'm really excited. So thank you for that invitation. And if somehow it doesn't work out, I think all your fans will be very disappointed.
Yeah. Well, let's see if we can get you over.
You heard it here first, people. Dan, aka Nitro from American Gladiators, may possibly be in our Ibiza retreat. So you've heard it here first. But yeah, so also I just need to point out, like, the reason we're, other than the fact that you're an absolute legend, we actually watched Muscles and Mayhem, which was a Netflix documentary that we'd love to talk to you about, but it really touched us. And it was actually, I reached out to you and asked you on the podcast, and you thankfully said yes. So we're very honored that you said yes. But that documentary was just amazing, not only because there were so many moments where James and I were like, oh my goodness, can you remember that? Yeah. Can you remember Saturday night TV where in England we had Baywatch, then we had Gladiators, and then we had something called Blind Date, and it was just a trip down memory lane for us. But also your story was the one that touched us the most, and that's why we can't wait to speak to you.
Yeah, well, Muscles of Mayhem on Netflix, even though it was about the American version of the Gladiators, it still did #2 in the UK. It debuted at #2 in the UK, and it stayed up there for almost 10 days in the top 10 chart. And then, the UK Gladiators now with Wolf Hunter, Jet, Lightning, and sorts. I'm really excited about them and the UK version, because we're talking to Netflix right now about possibly doing a docu-series about the UK version.
Wow.
So all of you Saturday nighters who would watch UK Gladiators before you went out to the pub, you may be getting your version of the docu-series. And when I create something, when I put something out there, I still want to tell a human story. And that was so important for me with Muscles and Mayhem. It's just not, hey, we were these, blokes and gals in the 90s who ran around spandex and pummeled people. I believe that every success, there's a pain to purpose story. You know, that pain to purpose story is, you know, we rise upon some of the pain in our past failures, or, you know, the ability to triumph over tragedy. And I wanted to tell that story of the gladiators, the human beings behind the larger than life persona, because I think when we share and illuminate the human experience, I think it connects us all. And in a world where everything is now disconnected, I think people are searching for connection and authenticity. So if you watch Muscles and Mayhem, you know, you'll talk about the origins of the shows, and you'll talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but it goes much deeper into the human beings, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like Claire said, we watched it, and it's that kind of nostalgia trip down memory lane, but it's the human stories behind it, the personal stories of the gladiators, of your story that really resonated and made that show. You know, it was, like you say, it wasn't just about, oh, here's the story of the show. It was about the human story behind it, and I guess the success, but being honest about the highs and the lows of it and the trials and tribulations. So it was really impactful.
Hugely.
Yeah. You know, when I sold it to Netflix, the show, I had to tell those human stories. I wrote a book called Gladiator, True Story of Roids, Rage, and Redemption, which is a memoir, and it's a fantastic read, not just because I wrote it. The gentleman who wrote Fight Club, Chuck Palahniuk, said it was one of the best books of the year and of the summer, and it's a much more in-depth look at being human. It's a much more depth of the journey of a little boy, which is my story, whose older brother died in his arms when he was electrocuted when I was 10, and his older brother who was 12. And in that culture and that time, especially, I have a Japanese mother, I'm half Japanese. Japanese are, well known for not expressing their emotions. My father was your typical, if you wrote the word Marine in the dictionary, you looked my dad, looked it up, my dad's picture would be there, go hung, American, let's go, rah, 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 rah. And, as a kid who lost his brother, I was never given that chance to grieve. I didn't have one conversation with my parents about it. It was, he died, we're going to, they're going to cry, we're going to grieve. And, I think they were both so lost in their own grief process, they forgot to provide guidance to, me. And so I had to figure things out for myself at a very young age. And I was told, that big boys don't cry. I was told big boys do not cry. So I sucked it up. I said, and plus, when something like that happens to you at a young age, it really forms who you're going to become. And then right then you have a choice. How am I going to take this? Who am I going to become? And when you're young like that, you don't have the conscious thought. You can't change your framework. You learn to survive. Because my older brother, again, I was 10, he was 12. He was my hero. He was my rock. He was everything to me. And I figured, if he's that strong, if he's that mighty, and he can die, what's going to happen to me? How am I going to survive? So I went on this subconscious quest to build all this muscle, to build all this size. And through time, looking back, opening up the hood, so to speak, and seeing what makes the car run, what makes this human being run, I realized that I put on all that size, all that strength, all that muscle as a protection mechanism to protect that little boy who was very, very afraid. I felt like the more size I had, I felt like the more muscle I had, the safer I would be. But it actually left me untouchable. There was no way to get inside of me to affect me. There was no vulnerability. It was a masculinity that was good, maybe in our ancestral times, where you go out, you hunt, you kill, you win, you are head of the tribe. It was that type of masculinity. It never gave me a chance to evolve. And it wasn't until like I said, I raised my hand to get help, because a lot of people search, especially midlife, right? We all search for, I think our younger dreams are to be successful, to have the mansion, right? To have the biggest, to have the best. At least that's the American dream. I know with Thatcher coming over to England, I think she instaured some capitalism into the British society. But over here, it's, bigger is better, stronger. You don't get a steak, you get a 5-pound steak. You don't have one German car, right? You have 3 German cars. That's the sign of success. You don't have one mansion, you have a mansion and a beach house. So it's hard,
isn't it? Exhausting. Sounds exhausting.
Well, Claire, it is exhausting, when your pursuit of things, when you think that pursuit of things is your path to happiness. And I was lucky to have everything I thought I wanted and needed at a young age. I'm 27 years old. I'm on the telly, I'm on billboards, I'm on posters. I have the access to, women, drugs, money, fame. I walk down the street. Oh, hey, you're that guy. And where I got lucky was I had everything I wanted, and yet it still felt like nothing. So a lot of people don't have that realization, and they're our age and they're still chasing. They're still chasing that success. I had it at 25, 26 years old, and I wasn't happy. You know what I'm saying? I had everything you think you want, but I still wasn't happy. I had everything yet, and it felt like nothing. And that was scary to me. It was scary to me because I was still, I was partying, I was, doing drugs. I was waking up on the floor quite a few mornings, intoxicated out of my mind, from alcohol, from whatever kind of drugs. And I would wake up in the morning on a few occasions, and I would find myself waking up on the floor, spit dribbling out of the side of my mouth. And I was just laying there weeping. And I said, I have everything that I thought I wanted, that people say is going to make you happy. And yet I'm here on the floor, high, crying. Something is wrong. And that was, like I said, 26, 27. That is when I decided, I need help. And that's when I raised my hand and I started to get coaching. I started therapy. I started to, like I said, lift up the hood and see what makes this human being tick. And it may sound awful, to have everything you want, but it was a blessing in retrospect, because that I could still be doing that now. And I still have that urge. I see my friend or somebody with a bigger house, and I'm like, oh man, I wish I had that house. And then I realized, no, Dan, Nitro, you've had that, and you weren't happy. So the work now, I think, at mid-age is really understanding yourself and saying, what does make me happy? And I don't like to use the word happy, because happy is it's quick. It's a short hit of something. I like to look at and build my life based upon what fulfills me. What are the small, simple, everyday practices that I can incorporate into my life that fulfill me, where I can go to bed at night? What are my tools in my toolbox? And I have tools, Claire and James, that I use every day. And when I find there's dis-ease, unease in my life, I say, oh, I'm not using those tools. Oh, did I tell you something else? I'm a legendary talker.
I know.
Us damn
We're captivated. We're completely captivated.
Us damn Americans.
No.
You put a mic in front of us and we can't stop talking about ourselves.
I actually want to jump in on a couple of things you said there.
No, it's captivated, man, honestly.
The first one is saying you had all that when you were young, that success and got you there. I think that will really resonate with our audience. I think what we experience when we talk to clients is they kind of have those things now in midlife. Maybe they've spent their life pursuing it, and maybe they've got the house, the career, whatever. They're like, oh, now I realize I'm not happy, and I've been chasing this empty dream. And like you say, they have to start the work now. The other thing I want to pick up on, which I think is really brave, is working with a lot of men as I do. I find that men, it's interesting to say, men do have this propensity to put on an armor, a front, whether that's a physical thing, emotional thing, and end up quite detached. And I think we need a mission in the world actually to help men be more emotionally available and more vulnerable. So I think then we can open up, though, like you were saying, about communication and build strong relationships. So I just have to hear your take on that.
Well, I think, you know, there's a thought going around that men are afraid to be vulnerable. And I think that's a misnomer. Men are not afraid to be vulnerable. We've just never learned to speak the language of vulnerability and what that looks like. Right. So there's a change there because, oh, you're just afraid to be vulnerable, honey. No, honey, I don't know how. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. You know, we come, you know, ancestrally, you know, we come from, and we touched upon this earlier, we come from a society where might was right. Who had the might was right. You know, if you were strong, if you were physical, if you could hunt, if you could bring home food, you were treasured. And that's what your job was. You didn't have to manage your emotions because your life was based upon survival. Can I go out and hunt and feed my family? If I can't, I fail. And the bigger and the stronger you were, and if you look at the primates, you know, the apes, the lions, the bigger, the stronger you were, the more benefits you got. If you were the king in that time period, which is programmed into us, you've got more females, you got more food, you got more comfort, you got more luxuries of that life. And also you were sure that your bloodline was going to go on because you would spawn with all the mate with all the females, right? You look at apes, it's one ape. It's one ape in the group. He is the king. Only he can have sex and recreate with the other females, right? And that's programmed into us where might is right. Then there became this transition, which, you know, as human beings, where we didn't have to go out, we became the corporate food structure, you know, where food became incorporated. I don't know if that incorporated is the right word, but the industrialized, where there's plenty of food, there's, you know, we can eat, we have the comforts, but yet inside of us, we're still programmed, men are, to, you know, might is right. And now that transition has changed. And now from our female partners, they want us to not only help provide, but they're also looking for a best friend and intimacy. And we're just on the edge of our demographic age-wise where we weren't taught that. We weren't taught that because with this shift is where women have been all the time. And the new shift in a new paradigm of society is it's no longer, you know, the strength and the might that gives you the keys to the kingdom. It's now what's upstairs in your brain. The guys who have the keys to the kingdom, you know, the over here, or the Bransons, you know, the Gates, the like Stephen Jobs, the Elon Musk, these guys aren't going in there and, you know, knocking guys out, you know, and taking food or meat, right? It's a different kind of thing, but yet we're still saddled. We still have that instinct. A lot of men do. And the only places that works for you is on the pitch, right? The football field. You know, if you're a Michael Bisping or UFC fighter, then might is still right. Yeah. So it's been a transition for men in this generation where we have to access another side of ourselves to connect, to be the father, to be the husband, to be the leader that we want to be, that you were not yet and have not yet really been taught and learned that language. So if you are listening and you're frustrated with your husband because he's not vulnerable, I don't think it's because he doesn't want to be. It's because he doesn't know how to be.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think of our generation, I don't know about in the US, but certainly for me, I went to boarding school at a young age. So 9, 10, I'm put in a school. There's suddenly all these like weird rules I don't understand. It was very violent. So, and then vulnerability was a weakness there. You don't show your emotions. So I've had to do a lot of work to overcome that. But I think that was quite a common story for a lot of people in England. Certainly men in England. But I think you're right.
Well, even more so with you guys. You guys have that stiff upper lip. I love you Brits. You know, you have that stiff upper lip. It's even different, even in your ability to communicate. I have English friends here, and she was telling me, she said, "Oh my God, the mother was, their kids are in grade school." She said, "My first day of grade school, I met another mother, and she was telling me about how her husband was cheating on her and her kid had this problem and that problem." She says, "She told me more in 30 minutes than some of my friends in England have told me in a lifetime." So over here, there's oversharing, right? There's this thing of oversharing, which is interesting. I think, vulnerability isn't so much the ability to be emotional, because I was emotional before, but I think vulnerability is to be emotional and let yourself be in that space and to embrace those feelings. It doesn't mean I'm still a very masculine male, it doesn't mean to be soft and needy, constantly weeping. It means that if that feeling comes up, it's okay to let it rise up within you and let it express itself, and I think that's the hardest thing, I still struggle with today is, being hard and who I am as a man and still being soft. Like the idea of like asking my partner, my Kim, to say, "I need a hug." That still makes me want to vomit. And I'm open and I'm vulnerable. I can tell you and I can weep, but just that idea where I need something from you that I can't do myself in order to be okay. I don't know. Like, yeah, just the idea of like, "Honey, will you hold me?" That is like still. And so I don't know, Claire, I will ask you, is that what women are looking for in vulnerability? To me, it just makes me want to like, vomit.
It's a really interesting question, because I know so many women will resonate with this, and you've alluded to it. We want the masculine, right? We really, really want that hunter-gatherer. That's still in us, to kind of want to be looked after. Whether women out there will agree with that or not, I think there is, in every woman, there is that want to be at least shown that level of being looked after. And that's very hard for us women as well, because again, the feminist movement has skewed up the feminine and the masculine, right? Because we've gone out and we've built walls around ourselves, actually, us women, to do everything that men can do, just be everything. But we can't, we're different, we're made up differently. And actually, we can't do everything that a man can do, but what we can do is our things in our own way. And we need to celebrate those differences. And I think that's where it's all got very confusing, is that we don't celebrate those differences. We've been trying to be like men for such a long time. And I see not a backlash, but I see a real problem from that in women right now, is that we've been striving, the women I coach, striving. We've been in such a masculine place that we have forgotten how to step into that more creative, grounded, peaceful, feminine state. So kind of in answer to your question, yes, we want you to be vulnerable and express your feelings, but we also still want you to run that tightrope of also being very masculine. And I don't know what the answer is to this.
I'm just making some notes here.
I don't know what the answer to that is, but I do know that I'm very, very blessed that I have that in James. And that has been quite rare in my life, for someone to be in the masculine, be very comfortable with their masculine, but also be very comfortable with sitting with their emotions and being vulnerable and saying to me, "I don't feel okay right now. Can you help me work through this?"
No, I think that's interesting. I think the ability for one of the partners to look over to the other and be able to say exactly that. So maybe that's the key, that opening. And,
Yeah.
said, I got this. Don't worry. I got this. I got this. No, I don't need help. I can figure it out. Where you're sitting and you're struggling, and that struggle and that being closed off from your partner is what keeps the distance.
Yeah.
Just that ability to say, hey, this is bothering me a bit, honey. I'm struggling. Do you think we could go over some strategies to help me figure this out?
Yeah. And that's, and that's where
because that brings value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we overly internalize stuff and don't let it out, I think that's when the problems come. Because then we start to get our own emotions like, I'm really struggling with this. Like, I should be able to handle it. I don't feel comfortable saying it. Why aren't they noticing that I'm struggling with it? So it's that overly internalization I think we need to overcome.
Yeah, well, we all think, there's two terms, we use in psychology. I think we're all familiar with being codependent. But what a lot of people aren't familiar with is being interdependent. So interdependent is something that I realized that I am, is because when I was a young kid, I didn't get my needs met, emotionally. There weren't people who made me feel like, hey, this is, you're going to be fine, Dan. You lost your brother. You're going to be sad. We're a family. We're going to work through this. So I didn't get those needs met. So I had to figure out how to do them by myself in order to survive, in order to be happy. So as a man, I grew up as a guy is like, I don't need anybody. I got it, and I still feel that way. I don't need anybody. I'm very self-sufficient, but I enjoy intimacy. I enjoy having one partner in my life who I can share my life with. I enjoy the company of people. And I think it's hard where I need to do my work is, and maybe I don't, it's like, I don't feel like I need anyone. I feel like if my significant other, who I love dearly, who we raised, a child together, if she was not happy in my life and she had to go to find her happiness, I would be upset. I would be heartbroken, but I would also be like, look, as a human being, I want you to be happy. I want you to go on your journey. The ego would be, oh, she left me. But I think the higher transcendent part of Dan would be like, no, she's a human being. I love her. I care for her as a human, not as my possession or property or something I own through an institutional performance of paperwork. She or he deserves to be happy. And, life is short. I want them to be happy. I had a heart attack 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years ago, this December 17th or 18th. And there were so many things I learned by facing my mortality. When I was in the hospital, and this will go back to something, midlife, I was 50 at the time, 49 at the time, 50. When I was in the hospital and the doctor comes to me and he says, how long have you been having chest pain? Because the ambulance brought me in and, all that stuff and the oxygen on my face. And I said, a couple hours. And he said, okay, you're having a heart attack. We need to get you to surgery as soon as possible. And, I'm a very positive person. I said, okay, great. Yeah, you got this, right? I'm in pain. Like, you got this, right? I'm going to be okay. And of course, I was looking for comfort. I was looking for reassurance. Hey, not on my watch. You're not going to die. I was hoping to hear that from him. But he said to me, you've had this for a few hours. I'll do everything I can and we'll see what happens. And at the time, I was like, wow, couldn't you have just lied? We got you, Nitro. We're not letting Nitro die on my table.
Yeah.
Again, in retrospect, it was a gift because in that moment, I did not know if I was going to live or die. And in that moment, when you think you're going to die, things that were important suddenly have no significance. The big house in the Hollywood Hills, the German cars in the garage, the plaques on the wall, all those things which were so important, suddenly in a snap of a finger became unimportant. What was important to me were two things. One is I wanted the people in my life that I loved to know that I love them. It was so important to me. Two, I also wanted them near me. And when I recovered from the surgery and from the heart attack, I remembered that lesson. Like if I'm going to die when that time comes, and it may be sooner than a lot of us think. I just had a friend, 47, 2 kids, passed away with cancer, boom, just gone. And, and I think we go back to vulnerability. I wept because I wept for his kids. They're going to grow, they're 12 and 14 years old. And so that ability to feel that and be in that space without fear, I think, and letting it pass through you, I think, is when we talk about what vulnerability would look like. For me, is something. But when I came back from the heart attack and as I started to recover, I built my life back on those principles. Because before, I was, chasing success, thinking success was the answer to happiness, right? I was going out. I hadn't even finished the bite I was eating, and I was looking for the next. I was just chasing. And I wrote a book. It's a second book I wrote. It's called Dying.
Yes.
How cheating death kicked my ass into loving, learning, and living my best life.
Yes.
And it was just full of all these antidotes that I learned from facing my death and mortality. And it's, and I wrote the book because sometimes we have an epiphany, and I'm sure it's happened to all you. You get a speeding ticket. You guys get speeding tickets there for going too fast or something?
One of us does, Dan.
You're pointing to her. That's funny. Well, so I think the effect is you get a speeding ticket, and right, I'll be talking to Claire only about this, James, because apparently you've never gotten one. So you get that speeding ticket, Claire, and what do you tell yourself after you get that speeding ticket?
I'm going to do it again.
You're never going to speed.
No.
Right? Yeah, I'm never going to speed again.
No,
Couple of weeks. And for how long does that last?
Well, in Spain, when we live in Spain, not more than about a week.
No.
We can't drive that fast in central London, but in Spain, I can drive pretty fast. So that lasts about a week.
Yeah. So whenever something happens to you, a lot of times that is a life changer. We forget those lessons as time goes by. We become numb to it. So I started finding myself becoming numb to the life lessons I learned. So I said, you know what? It was such an epiphany. I'm going to put it down in a book. I'm going to put down everything that I've learned, not so much so I could write a second book, but as a way for me to remember, as a way for me to understand, at 50 years old, damn it, this is the way I want to live my life. And hopefully by my writing that down and sharing it, people who are, looking for guidance at the midpoint can say, oh, okay, this guy almost died. And for him, he got the answers to the questions to the test, or the answers to the test before the test. And literally, I go back to that book, Dying, and I look at different things I wrote as a way to live my life. I also got my first tattoo. I didn't get a tattoo till I was 50 years old.
Yeah,
I see it.
My mum.
I'm still to go.
My mum, when James was first introduced to my parents, my mum, the first thing she said was, look at his beautiful blue eyes. He's got lovely blue eyes. And the second was, don't let her make you get a tattoo.
I understand that because, James, I'm like, I assume I'm like you. I didn't want anything on my body because I know my life thoughts can change.
Exactly.
You put, right. You put, some great band, from the 90s, you get the tattoo, and then all of a sudden they're not popular. Or you put a Nitro tattoo.
Gladiators.
Girlfriend's names crossed out, all over.
It's on your heart.
No, it's so true.
But yeah, it's really interesting.
So it's,
Dan.
Yeah,
sorry.
I was letting the dogs bark here. No, I was letting the dogs bark here. Maybe you couldn't hear them. So, on tattoos, I never wanted to put something in my body because I thought my, mind could change. I know as I've grown, things I used to love, I don't love so much anymore. Things I thought were important weren't as important. But after the heart attack, I wore in America over here, when you go to the hospital, they give you this little plastic band around your wrist. It gives you your ID, it tells you everything, your vitals. And I wore that thing for like 7 months. I didn't take it off. It was just a reminder to be grateful.
Yeah.
And I was in the kitchen 7 months later cooking one day, and all of a sudden it just like poof, it just like snapped and fell off and fluttered to the ground. And I remember looking at it on the ground. And for some weird reason, I just started to weep. I just started to weep openly. I was just sitting in my, 220-pound man standing in his kitchen, just crying. And I couldn't understand why. That night, I went to sleep and I had this dream. Now, I'm half Japanese. I was born in Japan. I'm an advocate of, Zen and Buddhism, even though I'm not religious. And that night I had a dream that I was in Japan. I was by a little creek and there was all those beautiful white cherry blossoms over me. And I was next to a Zen master, in the outfit and the gray hair, and I remember I was just crying in my dream, like I was in my kitchen as a 10-year-old boy. And I was just crying. And I was like, master, I don't understand. I don't understand. What am I supposed to do with my life? What am I supposed to do? And I'm weeping. I'm inconsolable. And he said these words to me. He said to me, life is not lost by dying. Life is lost minute by minute, day by day, by not really living. And I woke up and I wrote his words down on a piece of paper. That next day, I went and saw a tattoo artist and got my first tattoo on my forearm. And the gift in this is that when someone asks me about my tattoo, they read it and I remember the lesson again, and again.
Those are beautiful words as well.
Amazing.
Wow.
Like the subconscious mind is a bit like we have just finished a Jungian psychology diploma, and one of the things that Jung really taught was look at your dreams. Look at your dreams, write down your dreams. This is where your subconscious mind is opening up what the lessons are for us to work through in this lifetime. And actually, if you don't look at those dreams, this is why dream interpretation fascinates me, because I have insane dreams where I wake up and I journal them and I'm like, okay, what's the meaning in that? So until I journal until I've got some kind of meaning from it. So yeah, I love.
What's interesting, I dream about sex a lot. What does that mean?
I don't know. James, talk to me about that one.
I think that's just a man thing, I think.
Interpret Dan's dream then. I just actually really want to share something, because you've just really inspired me. When I was 20, I mean, you're inspiring me anyway, but when I was 27, I nearly lost my life.
Oh my God.
I had an ectopic pregnancy. And I remember coming round, and I was about 40 minutes away from not being here, but I never journaled those lessons. I had this epiphany. I changed my life after that. I went traveling around the world. I got divorced. I mean, I literally changed my life after that. But it's really interesting that you said you journaled them and documented them in that book, because I 100% what you say, we become numb to the lessons of our life. So thank you for just inspiring me, and also reminding me that when I got wheeled into surgery, I don't know whether, I still can't work out whether I imagined this, and it doesn't matter if I did or not, but I'm sure above the door that they wheeled me through, it said, life is what happens when you're making other plans.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
So I feel
it's
like
true, though.
That's my next tattoo now.
No, it's true. I love that saying. And I'm sorry about your experience, and I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that, it was a teaching and a learning moment for you, because you're able to show up today as who you are, and, express that with, the rest of the world. I agree with you about the subconscious mind. I'm also a licensed hypnotherapist. I only keep like 4 or 5 clients, but they're, very, very wealthy. They don't, so it's for me, it's not about the money so much, but I just keep a small amount because I know I can make a very significant impact on their lives. Because I think a lot of them are, CEOs, and they realize that, oh my God, I have everything again, and I'm not happy. How do I go back to build that happiness? But not only happiness, how do I live a healthy life? How do I increase my health span and my lifespan? Right. Yeah. So I think that that's important. But the subconscious mind, it is what changed my life at a very young age. When I was 14 years old, I was, I was a chubby kid. I was overweight. I was, terrible in sports. I know James is smiling. I had never done anything where I cannot remember a compliment in my life before 13 or 14 years old. I never had a compliment that I can remember. Again, I was always in my older brother's shadow. Then when he died, I was out on this island. I was trying to find my place in the world. And I was playing American football. And I'd been playing for 4 or 5 years. And I was a freshman in high school over here. And I was so terrible, I wasn't playing. And I quit. I just quit during the middle of the season. I was living with my mother and my stepfather. And I just quit, went home and, hey, I quit. Okay. Nobody said anything. And then that spring, I met a guy. No, it's not one of those kind of journeys. I met a guy and I'm different now, which is okay. I met a man. So my father had an office, and at night he leased his office. And this was 1978, to a hypnotherapist. And at 1978, I had no idea what hypnotherapy was. And he told me this really interesting thing. He said that your brain cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined experience and something that you do. And he said, by going into a relaxed state, which is all hypnosis is going into a relaxed state where your brain waves, through science, it's been tested, actually slow down a little bit. It's not a big scary thing. That's all it is. Your brain waves slow down from beta to alpha so you can get through the gate of your conscious mind to your subconscious mind. You can get past the analytical mind to where you can get the real work done. And he explained this to me. And as a young kid, all I understood was, wow, I can be successful in my mind. So I started hypnotherapy with him, and he did as a favor to my dad. And, I started visualizing while in a relaxed state of myself doing well on the football field, because that's what was important to me. I wanted to be a good football player. Within 1 year, I went from this kid who quit the team because he wasn't playing to the following year, I was the most valuable defensive player on the team. That's how dramatic the change was. Yes, I went and worked my butt off, my tail off on the field. I worked out. I did that physically. But for me, the first successes I ever had were in my mind. They were something I imagined. And there's this process of trusting that vision and doing the daily work. Notice I say you have to do the daily work. Yeah. You just don't see, for me, I just don't see it. It happens. But even though I do believe you see things and the universe has a way of conspiring to bring them to you, there's a higher collective consciousness and intelligence up here that can help bring things when you learn to connect and access that. But yeah, I became the most valuable player the next year on the defensive side. And from that day on, I've used meditation, hypnosis, self-hypnosis as a tool to, change my life and become the human being that I wanted to be, to have a lot of the success that I've had.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. That really resonates.
It's what we do.
The power of the mind, when you know how to work with it and harness it, it's so powerful, like you say.
Yeah, and it's part of our program, actually, the Midlife Method program that we run. You were talking about your toolkit right at the beginning. Like that's what we love to give people, is that toolkit that they can use in daily life. And it's not just, you also saying that it's not just about you sitting there, because in my 20s I was all into that. I'd sit there just visualizing, thinking, okay, yeah, I'm going to get that, and I'm going to get that, and I just sat in a meditative state waiting for these things to come, and obviously they didn't. I needed to act.
Well, the secret is you also need to do the work. Remember that big thing, The Secret?
Yeah,
just imagine it. Yeah, you also need to work your ass off.
Yeah, just wishing for it doesn't work.
Yeah, they should have put another chapter in that. You also need to work your ass off at the back of that.
Well, here's something that I've really learned to understand is, all great things, and this, as a cliche, are done one step at a time. And the real strength is the ability to get yourself to do something when you don't want to, when you don't feel like it, but you need to. If you can get past that resistance, however you do, and sometimes, quick hypnosis visualizations, how to get over procrastination, a 5-minute session, 10-minute session, visualize all these things are the tools that you have to have. And, it's interesting. Almost every profession has tools. But yet, when we look at the profession of human beings becoming better human beings, people don't want to use tools. I should know I'm alive, but I have so many tools, in my kit that I use. And that when I do rarely coach, that I use as well. Some of my tools, I wake up every morning and I journal. I call them the morning pages. There's a woman named Julia Cameron who wrote a book 30 years ago, which I found and I discovered when I wanted to start screenwriting. Julie Cameron, I can't think of the name of the book, but it's if you look her up, but it's morning page. It's a whole idea of journaling 20 minutes to get the stuff out. What do I need to do today? I got to do this. I got to do that. You do that for 4 or 5 minutes, and then you get to the good stuff. I always finish my morning journaling by writing down, if I did this today, I will feel successful. So I have a pathway and I have a map, and I don't say, if I wrote my whole book today, I will be successful. It's like I write 5 pages of this new book today, I'll be a success. I show up for my wife and I put my phone down at dinner. I spend some time with my son. I exercise. I meditate. I take time today, to go on the walk. And when I'm there, I spend a few minutes in forest gaze. This is how I will be successful today. So I set myself up for success, because if you don't have a roadmap of what's going to make you feel good and what it is, how do you ever feel good? It's by chance, Yeah. And I think the hardest thing is to realize that delay does not mean denied. I think so many people try things for a little bit and they don't have the success they want, but they're not willing to put the work. This is the last story I'll share with you. My 12-year-old stepson, he wanted an iPhone. He was actually 11 at the time. He wanted an iPhone. And I'm like, I'm not buying you an iPhone just because you want it. You have to earn it.
Yeah.
He says, okay. I've taught him a work ethic. And he says, okay. He says, what do I have to do? And I said, 5,000 push-ups. And he was like, Dad, come on, I can't do 5,000 push-ups. And I said, yeah, you can. And I said, can you do 25 push-ups a day? He's 11 years old, I think, at that time. I said, you can do 5 before breakfast, 5 after breakfast, 5 when you come home, 5 after dinner, 5. And he's like, yeah. And I said, I'm going to take a board and we're going to write boxes equivalent to the number of 5,000 push-ups, 200 boxes each day. You're going to have a visible chart and you're going to go mark that off. Right. And then you do it for, 100 days, that's 2,500. So it was an amazing process to teach him that consistent effort done over time, you can accomplish great things. He actually got to the point where I had to tell him not to do so many in one day. I mean, imagine that 11-year-old boy saying, hey, can I do 200 today? I'm like, no, it's too much for your little body. Thanks. And his mom is like, what are you doing? Not 200. It's too much. Stop. I want that phone. Yeah. So what that teaches him as a young man is that it teaches him that consistent daily work pays off over time if you set a plan and you do it, but also gives him self-esteem. Yes. Which is so important, because we live in this society where we give our kids everything to make them happy. They don't earn things. How do you feel good about yourself? Is you earn things. You build self-esteem through your work and through your dedication. And we all know that is the journey, because that win, the Netflix show, number one in the United States, that was amazing. 2.5 years of work, 1 week of number one, 2 weeks of people like, oh my God, and 3 weeks, and it's quiet again. You're back to doing the normal thing. The win lasts so long. If you don't enjoy that 2.5 years, you're going to be sad, disappointed, upset, not happy for the majority of the time. To succeed today is you have to learn, one, to be able to get yourself to do stuff when you don't want to, because it's for the greater good. 2, the real gift here is to learn to love what you do. Not the win, because the win is just a brief moment in time. Learn to love what you do, because that's what you're doing for 98% of the time. The win is just the icing on the cake.
I love that, Dan. Really wise words.
What an amazing way to finish this podcast.
This has been really inspirational. Thank you.
It's been incredible.
Just before you go, so what is next for Dan?
What's next?
And if people wanted to learn more about you, reach out to you, how would they do that?
So people can find me on social. I just got back on social. I was off for about a year and a half, but with, part of the mechanism of having a show on TV and being public, you got to get back on social. So Dan Nitro Clark on Instagram, Dan Nitro Clark on Facebook. If you want to reach out to me directly, it's dan@dannitroclark.net. That's the email. You can reach out. I'm very responsive. I figure if you have time to drop me a DM or email me about something, I'm at least going to write you back and say, thanks for the note. I appreciate you. So those are the ways to do it. I appreciate you both.
Oh, honestly, Dan,
this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it.
You've got such an amazing story. And I know so many people are going to absolutely love this. You've just been an absolute pleasure to listen to, and you've really inspired us.
Really, I'm so excited about Ibiza. I'm so excited about this.
Wow. So are we.
Yes, so are we. Listen, if, there's a few spaces left, so if you want to meet Dan in person, you better get in quick. But we're so excited to have this opportunity to connect with you. We think you're absolutely awesome, and everything you're doing, everything you're putting out in the world is to benefit, is going to benefit so many people in a way that you already have. Yeah. So,
well, James, I appreciate you. The man that you become, according through the eyes of Claire, is how I see you. And Claire, I can see all your radiance and good things you're putting out, and I appreciate you taking the time to have me on today. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You've been listening to the Midlife Mentors with Claire and James Davis.
We'd love to hear from you. So drop us a line at info@themidlifementors.com with any questions or topic suggestions.
And make sure you join us on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. You can find us under the Midlife Mentors.
Yeah.